Blending snowdrifts on cards doesn't have to be complicated. I'm going to show you some very simple techniques, but with what you're going to learn today, you will get an absolutely stunning and natural result. Hi, my name is Ingrid Blackburn. This channel is about exploring fun, simple techniques to make the most of your supplies. Let's dive right in. I love creating winter scenes. We're going to reboot the card that's on the right. We're going to give it a little bit more of a contemporary feel, and we're going to also strip it down a little bit to just the basics for you today, showcasing techniques as well as what you need to make the most realistic scene every single time. So to replicate that look, we have to master the shadow, basically. To get started in your scenes, you just need a few basic supplies. You need some sort of a mask, and that is going to mask off your snowy hill. I cut some label paper at kind of a swoopy angle using some long-handled scissors. A lot easier to cut straight curves with long-handled scissors than it is short ones. I like using label paper because it secures my entire project down. Tumble Glass by Distress. Hands down, the best ink for snowdrifts. Super light, extremely translucent. I'm going to use a dome ink blending tool. Now you can use blender brushes, you can use sponge daubers, you can use artist sponges, whatever you have. Very, very light circular motion here. And I go over this in detail a little bit further into the video. I really break it down even in slow motion to show you the exact technique. So definitely stay tuned for that. Now what you're going to do here is you're going to build up layers. You're not going to cover the entire width of your scene. You want this to be in spots, and that's one of the keys to snowdrifts is controlling where the shadow is. If you have it going completely across, it takes away from the magic of it. It doesn't look as realistic. So you can see here working a little bit to the left side, which is going to be covered by trees, but it's going to be something that's behind the trees that you see through the trees. And that's, again, kind of that play on, what's going on there. You can see here, this is the correct way to hold your tool, no matter what you're using. You don't want to work on it on an angle when you are putting it down to paper. You want to make sure it's completely straight. Now that we're going to speed this up a little bit throughout and kind of jump back and forth, we're using Stormy Sky as well to give a little depth. And you can see here just adjusting my mask, moving it into another position. I've incorporated a second mask, and again, just going to keep this now at a different angle to create a different shape of shadow. Not everything needs to be exactly the same, and this helps provide something that's interesting when you're looking at your project. This one has a little more on an angle, and then I'm just going to do a light one off to the left side using the layers of Tumble Glass and Stormy Sky. We want to limit the amount of the darker color, concentrate more on the lighter, and definitely come back in with your lighter. But look at this. You can see it's kind of now starting to be something as we pull these off. You can kind of see the magic, and it's by having that little bit of sponging there, that depth, that makes you feel like there's a ridge and a drop off, and that is going to help along with the stamps that we're going to use in a particular way of putting them down and where size goes where. That's going to build your entire scene. Now, if you want a thorough, detailed tutorial, definitely check out the Patreon community. There you can ask questions, you can get help, and you can work right alongside me in a tutorial that has way more tips and help for getting the perfect scene every single time. Now this is going to be our uppermost ridge. We're going to start to work on the sky a little bit. Bringing in some sponge sugar, and sponge sugar is probably Distress's lightest shade of pink. It's beautiful. I'm not a big pink person, but I really love this pink. It's almost like a baby pink. And you're just going to create some light layers, and we're going to create some light layers with sponge sugar and now with some Tumble Glass just in the bottom to the middle sky. You can see here going all the way across. I'm holding that tool nice and straight. And what we don't want to go too dark here because we still need to lay down our moon mask. But I wanted to have a little bit of color underneath it before we did that. And that's why you don't want to build up too much, and you also don't want to forget to put your moon down. I've done that before. So go ahead and place that down like this. And now we're going to just go to town on the sky, and we're going to use a combination of Tumble Glass, Stormy Sky, and then we're going to pull in some Chipped Sapphire to bring this, which is the darker shade, and that's going to really take this sky to a different level. So you can see here we kind of jumped ahead, And I had done lots of layers on the various colors. You're going to want to leave some light in the center of your project. And if you're using brushes, be careful because you can lay down a lot of color really fast. You don't want your project to look flat. And we want to be very deliberate in where we're adding the darkest shade. And to help really make this point, I'm going to actually slow it down right here. We're going to like instant replay. Now you can see my form is not so great right here. I'm actually slightly tilting my tool. And that's just me going too fast. That happens even to me. Now here I straightened it out. This is actually proper form right here, and we will showcase proper form again at the very end of this instant replay. But right here, I'm going to now show you when I'm talking about edging, see that tilt, see how the pressure of the tool, it's on the glass mat. It is not on the project. Especially going around a corner, you really want to be careful because you can lay down way too much ink. But being that the tool is domed, it also really helps to get the ink exactly where it needs to be without any harsh lines. I really cannot stress enough that this is an awesome tool. Now we're back to proper form. And then in a second, we're just going to come right back and keep going. How was that? Did that help? Let me know. Leave me a comment and tell me if that made sense. And you know what? I would love for you to actually really try that and see how it helps. Even with you, if you have the flat tools or the brushes, same concept. Where your pressure is key in ink blending. And you can see now we're developing the darkness along the edge of the project. And with this reveal, just like in the snow, the dark and light, that makes this magical. But that's just the first step. Next up, we need to add realistic stamping in a particular way. One of the biggest keys to creating a really great scenic card is having the right size stamps in the right places. So I'm using a particular stamp set by Stampers Anonymous, and this is a great stamp set. We're going to use Icing on the Cake ink by Catherine Pooler, another fabulous brown. It's nice, deep, rich, and it goes on like a dream. We're going to use the stamp set Tree Line, and it has a couple of these long lines of trees as well as 5 individual trees. You can see I'm using a Misty to get the perfect position, and I highly recommend some sort of stamp positioning tool, only because you spent so much time to create that gorgeous background. The last thing you want to do is mess it up, by having a stamping mishap. We're going to also use Into the Sky. This is a fabulous stamp by Penny Black, and what's really important about this stamp is it makes the scene. We're just going to use the tops of it, and you might not always think to just use part of your stamp, but what that's going to do, notice that we do have that mask back in place. So basically what we're doing is we're stamping these items behind that ledge that we are, as the viewer, pretty much standing on looking into the scene. So by adding this particular stamp right here, this is the biggest stamp that we have, meaning that the image itself is a little bit more realistic, like real life. So it feels like we're standing right there, whereas those 2 trees that we stamped, they're a little bit smaller in scale. So when we actually reveal the mask, it feels like there's a big drop off and those trees are a little bit back. Perspective is everything in scenic cards. Now you could always create your scene from the top down. It doesn't have to, I just happen to be working from the foreground back. And it's interesting because usually I actually do the foreground last, and the foreground being the Into the Sky stamp. You see here, these are some of the options that are in this stamp set, Tree Line by Stampers Anonymous. And I love options. I would really love a larger tree, an even larger tree, because I find that when you have the variety and scale, for scenes, that's fabulous. So when you're creating your stash of stamps, and the trees don't always have to look exactly the same. Now these happen to have somewhat of a contemporary look, so it's kind of hard for me to grab just any tree. But you want to have some sort of variety if you can. So that's what I would look for. There are a couple companies out there, Stampscapes, Stampers Anonymous, Penny Black, Impression Obsession. There's several companies that have wonderful scenic elements for you to build a great library of stamps to create literally anything with. So you can see that I added those 2 on the right, and those are actually the biggest trees in the scene, which which worked really well. So being that, the ones that are up top, those need to be smaller. So you can see that we're just going to stamp just part of it. I also encourage you to go off the edge of your project, because that helps make the scene a little more believable. And it's also, here's the entire set. See, it's a great one to add to your collection. So here is the scene. We still have a little bit more to go that is going to actually pull it all together, because as great as it looks now, we can take it to a whole nother level. Adding a little bit of tumbled glass here on the bottom because it's just a little too much white and we have got all that color. So I want to talk a little bit about important finishing touches. This was my original scene that I was basing this one off of. You can see that I added a light snowfall on that, and I actually have that video also in the patron community. So I have both for people to look at because it uses different tools. But to finish this scene off, we need to pull you into it even a little more. And there's one very simple thing that you can do. Switch off your nice new dome tips. I love those. And do a little edging here with that icing on the cake. It might feel a little awkward to do that, but I guarantee you this one teeny little step, it does two things. It draws you in, but then it also makes it so that you don't need an actual colored mat. Now here, when adding your fonts, I want you to always be aware kind of what your scene looks like and pair the correct looking fonts to match the feel of your scene. This is a great one by it's from the gifting and tag set by scrapbook.com. They have some wonderful Christmas variety stamp sets. I highly encourage you to go check them out. And this one little tiny thing is something that can really jazz up a one layer card. So I'm going to take some premium clear ink by scrapbook.com. This is their embossing ink, and look at how cool their container is for their ink. The lid snaps into the base and there's finger grips. So basically what you're doing is you're making it a little bit easier to hold. All their ink pads are like that, which I think is just such a smart design. So we're going to actually now do that directly over. This is why Misty comes in very handy, because we did it in icing on the cake, and then we're going to emboss it in clear. That's how you turn all of your ink into embossing powder. How awesome is that? But I love Christmas cards that have that raised lettering. Now I'm just taking some pre-folded card bases by Tonic, gonna pop that up. See how it doesn't need a mat? And then I went ahead and did an envelope, and I have all that in that real-time tutorial as well. So, but you know, it's a great project. I hope you learned something. Definitely leave me a comment, subscribe if you haven't subscribed. I have 2 videos right here that will teach you even more techniques using other tools, and I think you'll really get a lot out of them as well. So I'll see you right over there.